The Michigan eviction notice. What is an eviction notice? Eviction notice, or notice to quit, is a letter sent by the landlord to the tenant notifying them that they should either take or stop a certain action or vacate the rented premises. Eviction notice can be of two types: conditional, when a tenant is given time to remedy the breach of the lease, or unconditional, when a landlord terminates the lease without any alternative options for a tenant. What should an eviction notice include? Information about the tenant and the landlord. The reason for sending the notice. The date by which the tenant should take or stop a certain action. The consequences of non-compliance. The date and way of notice delivery, and the landlord's signature in the form of certificate of service attached to the notice. How to evict a tenant in Michigan. Non-payment notice. There is no statutory grace period for rent payment in the state of Michigan. This enables the landlord to send the notice to the tenant the very next day after the rent is due, unless otherwise stated in the lease. The Michigan legislature gives the landlord the right to send a 7-day notice to quit to the tenant who fails to pay rent due prior to starting an eviction case. The landlord is not required to give the tenant a chance to pay owed sums by the state law. Non-compliance notice. In case of other lease violations, Michigan law also does not set a requirement for the landlord to give the tenant the possibility to correct the issue. The landlord is only required to send a 30-day notice to quit, giving the tenant the time to move out. However, when it comes to violations that threaten health and safety of other tenants on the rented property, the landlord has to send the tenant a 7-day notice to quit, but the law does not prohibit them from giving the tenant time to correct the issue. If the tenant is involved in illegal drug activity, the landlord is required to send a 24-hour notice to quit. What if the tenant fails to comply? If the landlord aims at starting an eviction process, they can file a complaint with the appropriate Michigan court. The filing fee is $45. If there is also a money claim, an additional filing fee of $25 to $150 will be added. The tenant should be served with the summons and complaint by the person authorized by court no later than 3 days prior to the court hearing. The tenant can file an answer with the court, but it is not the state's requirement. Failure of the tenant to appear for the hearing, even in the case of filing the answer, will result in making a judgment in favor of the landlord. If the landlord wins the case, a writ of restitution will be issued. If the eviction was initiated due to non-payment of rent, the tenant can stop it if they pay the sums owed along with any other costs the judge may order. According to the writ, the tenant has to move out within the period specified by local laws. If the tenant refuses to leave the premises, they will be forcibly removed by a law enforcement officer.